We're thinking about the sacrum almost like a barrel. And the tendency when this is locking closed is for the barrel to roll this way. Now, if we were doing a postural assessment and the person was standing, what would we normally call that? Being anterior pelvic tilt, right? Yeah. Now, that's not always the case because sometimes people have an anterior shift. So anterior tilt is really in relation to what's happening with the femur. When I go into an anterior shift, if I was to actually stand back up straight, you'd see my pelvis is actually posterior, right? Isn't that weird? So the person can actually have an anterior shift. In relation to the femur, they have a posterior tilt. But in relation to the lumbars, they have this lock and close. Like a bit too complicated? Okay. And from this side, okay, let's go back to the simple thing. For most people, these joints are locked in extension. We could say they're locked closed. I'm kind of mixing between Till's terminology and the terminology we usually use. I would tend to refer to this as locked closed facets. The opposite would be a locked open facet. Till's using slightly different terminology, but we're talking about the same thing because he's saying a spine that's stuck in extension, which is probably a little easier to get your head around. But when it's in extension, when it's stuck in extension, the facet joints are stuck closed. Yeah. If you're stuck in flexion, the kyphosis kind of effect, you're stuck in flexion and the joints are locked open, they can't close. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. You see that we're talking about the same thing here? Yeah. Just the language is just coming again from a slightly different perspective. Coming from different perspectives is good because the more perspectives you get, the more complete the picture. So when we get this cramming closed, this locked in extension, closing of facet joints, this puts a lot of pressure on this area. What we're going to really try and do is we're going to try and pull the sacrum away from L5. We're going to try and open those joints. Does that make sense? Yeah. Really what we're trying to do is restore function because we want them to be able to open and close. Now the hold here is really quite important. When you're working on your client, if you work down along the spine, the easy way to find L5 is that there is a sudden change in angle. So it feels like the lumbars are going along and then suddenly there's a dead stop. Again, like with all the techniques, there's a little bit of subtlety to this to really get it feeling good and effective. I want to try and get the heel of my hand. If you slide your heel down, you'll feel the curve of the lumbars and then a sudden stop when you get to the sacrum. Yeah. But I don't want to jam in with my heel. That's useful for finding where you should be. Once you're at the sacrum, you're actually going to really try to relax your hand and mold the shape of the sacrum. Okay? Because you don't want the pressure to be pointed against bone. You'll pinch skin and it'll be a little bit sore. So I'm thinking about really trying to not just push towards her feet, but I'm trying to get her pelvis to roll back. Again, think of this barrel analogy. I'm trying to get the barrel to roll down the table. Now, there's a couple of different ways we can do this. We can just hold. Or if I want a little bit more pressure, I can actually sit one forearm on the other and wind. So as I wind, I'm stretching the tissue of her thoracolumbar fascia up, but it's also helping me to maintain a sustained pressure down. You feel it's a little stronger like that? Yeah. It's still gentle. It looks very strong, but it's really quite gentle.
And if you can't exactly what they need to do, where that's locked there, it's still a decompression and it's beneficial anyway.
Yeah, and it'll move quickly. Yeah, you'll find 2 or 3 techniques and the sacrum starts moving. But it's still, again, a calming process. It's bringing the nervous system out of that sympathetic response. You have to remember, most people are in a sympathetic state to some degree. We're rarely like perfect homeostasis.